So let's talk to the lady that we have been talking to for years now in anticipation of this election result. Our wonderful friend, Megyn Kelly. Megyn, can you believe it? It happened.
I know. God bless him. God did bless him, Paul. I mean, there are a lot of people here who really feel like it was divine right order, that he was saved at the Butler rally because he had something important to do. And that everything since then has been Trump fulfilling his destiny to retake this very important role and change the world, starting with our country. There's so much he can do on day one. It's actual, like, he will be saving lives on day one of his presidency just by shoring up the border with a stroke of his pen. Joe Biden undid it with a stroke of his, and Trump can reassure us of our safety all along the southern border on day one of his presidency. It was his main issue that he ran on. I have zero doubt that he will do it. And for that reason today, I am celebrating. I think literally this was a life-saving election. Donald Trump was made for this fight. And now he will fulfill his ultimate destiny in these next 4 years, and then hopefully be able to somehow ride off into the sunset and enjoy a relaxing retirement, even though that doesn't sound like Donald Trump.
Now, I want to go back a couple of days before the election because you were at a rally and you gave a phenomenal speech. I want people to be able to see a little bit of it first.
I really enjoy this feeling of proving Mark Cuban wrong. And so here I am at a Trump rally, a strong, intelligent woman to prove Mark Cuban wrong again.
Now, forget RFKJ, forget the MSG rally. That's the moment where he won this election. You did it.
Definitely not. No, Trump got himself there. But I'll tell you, I was happy to do it, Paul, because, it was like I've been so distressed over the gaslighting of the American people and of American women on the core issues that I know we care about. I mean, the Democrats define us entirely by our wombs and our ability to kill our unborn children. That is all they think we care about. And I am a woman. I'm a mom. I'm a wife. And I know that my own set of desires and hopes and my concerns for the world revolve around far more than the right to get an abortion if I or someone I know wants one. And so it was burning. It was burning me. I wanted to go out there and say what I know all of my friends actually care about, what I actually care about. And it's not entirely defined at all by abortion rights, which, by the way, as we've discussed, is a states' right issue. It is not a federal issue. That's all been one big head fake. So it was cathartic to stand up there and talk about the actual issues that are affecting women outside of that one, which has already been adjudicated. And to the extent it hasn't been, it's a matter of state and local elections, not the federal one. There are a lot of things the U.S. president can do to keep women safe. Anything revolving around abortion is not on the list. He doesn't have the power, and I'm sure the left is very happy to admit that now that Donald Trump has actually won.
I reckon one of the most fascinating things about the election is that in deep red parts that voted for Trump by 10, 20 points, they also voted to legalise and protect abortion. Isn't that the whole idea of this country? That states have different laws, different systems, but they can also walk and chew gum at the same time.
Absolutely right. Same way you go to certain states in the union and you will see guys carrying very large guns that are AR-15s because it's open carry and they're allowed to just walk around having the guns. That can be very jarring to people visiting from other countries or blue states like New York, where you would never see that. That's fine. It's cultural. Each state has its own particular culture and personality and value set. And we knew that 250 years ago when the country was coming together. And it was a source of negotiation saying we don't want to be homogenous. We want to be one union that works together on some common goals, but no one wants to give up their individual personalities or value sets. Only in today's regime are we now suddenly told everyone must feel as the Democrats do when it comes to the abortion issue. So now we are settling back down into what used to be stasis, where each state is allowed to be its own independent laboratory on laws and values and so on, as long as they don't conflict with the ultimate laws, which are our Constitution. And the Supreme Court said in Dobbs that that's not regulated by the Constitution. States, do your thing. So now we're back where we ought to be. Second point. All the past, 6 months or more, a year, the Democrats have been talking about how Kamala needs to be president because she needs to, at the federal level, write a national abortion law. Congress writes it and she'll sign it, restoring the Roe regime in all 50 states. And all along, I've been saying this is such a head fake. It's nonsense because Congress doesn't have that power. Congress can only legislate certain things if it has the power written into it by the Constitution, like the Commerce Clause or the taxing power. If it doesn't fall within one of its enumerated powers, it can't regulate it. And that includes abortion. It doesn't have the power to regulate abortion at the national level. It's tried in the past. Some of those laws stood because they weren't challenged, arguing Congress didn't have the power to do it. But trust me, if Trump ever tried to sign an abortion ban, it would be, and the Supreme Court would say he doesn't have to do it. My point is simply, she was running around saying, we should do it, we should legislate it, and we should get rid of minority rights in the Senate with a filibuster. Get rid of the filibuster so that there's no more minority rights. We can get laws through with only 51 votes instead of the necessary 60 on things like this. And now that she's lost, will she admit that that was a terrible idea? Now that she's in the minority in the Senate, her party, you think they're going to maintain that same position, that it can be regulated on a national level, that the good idea is to get rid of minority rights in the Senate, to jam this down the throats of the American people writ large? You watch the 180, it's going to go like that.
Now, I know Harris, of course, officially conceded just a few hours ago, but I think the true insight into her character was that despite being the fighter and the person who was there for joy, on election night, she left the tens of thousands of people who had desperately hoped that they were going to watch some history, who had broken hearts, but she just left them by the side of the road.
She didn't even have the stones to go out there and face the people who supposedly love her and say, we're going to wait until tomorrow. There's still more counting to be done. And out of respect for the voters in those states, I'm going to hold off on my message, but I love you. I thank you for your tireless work on my behalf, and to be continued. It would not have taken anything more than that. But this woman, this I'm speaking, empowered woman, sent a male staffer out there who nobody even knew to tell them she wasn't coming. She was cowering in the back, just like Kamala's been doing. She's been cowering and she's been cackling. And what she hasn't been doing is actually standing up and fighting for America's working class. And last night, they had the final say on her, saying, we're done. We don't believe in you anymore. Black, white, Hispanic. It was the working class that put Trump over the top because he does speak to them and he speaks for them. And Kamala Harris eventually spoke today, and hopefully now will be leaving the national stage very soon.
Look, she's obviously going to do better than the corpse of Joe Biden, but she, of course, was deeply unpopular as vice president. They were joking about her when it came to her mystical garbage word salads. Let's be honest, was her candidacy really dead on arrival?
Yeah, I do. I think that's true because of the economic situation in the United States, which she had a hefty hand in creating in the first place. They created this inflation. It did not have to happen. They took office and they started spending like drunken sailors, and it was not to solve the pandemic. They just used that as an excuse. We'd already dumped trillions back into the economy to help people suffering from the pandemic. They continued keeping that spigot on, and then they shoved this multi-trillion-dollar bill down our throats called the Inflation Reduction Act, which Biden would later admit was an obvious misnomer. It had nothing to do with solving inflation. It was all his green energy agenda items, which are very expensive and don't work. And when people were saying, we need relief on this inflation, we make 30 grand a year and prices are up 18%. We can't pay our rents. We can't pay our mortgages. We can't pay our heating bills. What we were told was, you're wrong. It's not happening. First it was, oh, it's Russia's fault because of the Ukraine war. Then it was, it's not happening. Then it was, okay, it's happening, but you should be grateful for it because in some way it's good for you, or just suck it up. You're really just bitching about not being able to buy your latest Peloton. And that's why those guys in hard hats, like the ones behind me at that speech, wound up so disaffected and angry. Like, I know what's in my bank account. I know I can't afford $9 milk. I am not making it up. And so she started off hobbled to begin with because of those circumstances she helped create. And the same is true on immigration. They created it all. By design, by executive order, they undid all the protections Trump had in place. They wanted to open the border, and they got exactly the chaos they desired. They let 10 to 20 million illegals in this country who went to community after community and ruined the American experience for so many citizens, and killed and raped and molested children. This is not hyperbole. This actually has happened over the past 4 years. And then when asked, why did you do that? Finally, you pushed some lame immigration bill 3.5 years into your administration. Why didn't you do anything before? She just kept saying, well, I am going to talk to you now about what needs to be done, but it hasn't been done, but it needs to be done, and it's going to be done. That literally was her answer. So I think all of that set her up to fail because the policies were so disgusting and destructive that even an Obama-like politician would have had a serious uphill climb. But she's absolutely talentless as a politician, and that was on full display for the past 108 days.
Yeah, I mentioned this earlier in the show. You know, in the same way that people, give up sugar or alcohol, tea, cigarettes, whatever, I reckon that for an awful lot of Americans, they've given up on a type of media that lazily we've called the mainstream media for a while. They're not the mainstream media, they're the old school media, they're the access media, they're the narrative media, they're the dominant media, because they, of course, did everything they could during this campaign to scandalise every little thing about Donald Trump. The reality was that was nowhere near where people were in this country. Now, that doesn't mean Trump is perfect and must be, covered like a North Korean leader. But am I right in feeling that for a lot of people, they're just done? They're done with the media and they're never going to interact with it again. They're going to get their news from people like you in places like YouTube.
That's exactly right. That's one of the most gratifying parts of today is that the leftist media is realizing they don't control the conversation anymore. We're not listening to them anymore. The American populace did not buy that he is Hitler or a fascist or a white supremacist or any of the nonsense. 10 years ago, I think the media could have pushed this narrative much more effectively. There was not as much competition. They were dominant. They had a monopoly over the sharing of news. And now it's a whole new world. And that is why you're seeing some of the reaction from people like Jen Psaki over on NBC, who's formerly of the Biden White House, saying what we really need to do is crack down on these alternate forms of information who need to be regulated just the same way we are. Those of us who have these very high standards where we push Russian collusion hoaxes, they need to rise up to our standards if they're going to be this important contributor to the national conversation. Well, you know what, Jen? You don't control that. You didn't win anybody that could govern us. And by the way, even if you did, you couldn't because there's this pesky thing called the First Amendment. What you're feeling is panic at the loss of power and control. And you should be feeling that because you've had it for far too long and you did not wield it responsibly. So I think you're absolutely right. I mean, the future of media for a long time has been individual relationships between consumers and I think individual news figures or podcast hosts, whomever you find trustworthy. And most people have a diet of a couple or a few. And it is not these corporate controlled entities that push their agendas on you from above. And they've never been so weak and non-credible as they are today. And that's yet another victory of the Trump win.
Let's look into the future. What is the number one thing that you are most excited about the early days of a Trump term?
Close the border. Close the border. As concerned as I am for our girls' sports, and it's right up there, almost my top issue, but the border's number one. People are dying. I mean, these are bad guys who are crossing that border, from terrorists to criminals to rapists, and they cannot be allowed to keep coming in here like it's a sieve, because once they get in here, we never get rid of them. And that's my number two most excited. That's the number two thing I'm most excited about, which is the deportations. Not of the guy who came 10 years ago and married a woman and they're living peacefully. That guy's not going to get deported. It's of the bad guys who have come here criminally, who get caught, and then they're not deported, and they're not even handed over to ICE. because we have these sanctuary cities that won't cooperate, all of which Trump is going to crack down on. He's promised that he will. Those people need to be sent back home or out of the country. We need to go full Aussie on them. You guys understand how not to deal with these people, and we need to take a lesson. And I think President Trump is committed to it, and I can't wait to send them back to Venezuela. So if they want to commit more crime, they can do it in their country of origin and not in our towns and cities and at the expense of our kids. It's a disgrace that Biden and Harris let this go on as long as they did. My only concern and hope is that we changed power in time to undo it.
Megyn, thank you for taking us on this journey. As we think at times we're walking on eggshells, but the reality was the American people were headed only in one direction, and it's the direction that thankfully you and I have been talking about for a very long time. We love you, darling. I look forward to seeing you again next week back in the Man Cave.
Oh, thank you, Paul. It's a glorious day. Enjoy Washington, D.C., and enjoy what feels like the dawn of a new day and freedom. I mean, ironically, that was her motto, but it's what Trump is going to restore in the United States of America. God bless. God bless the USA.
Megyn Kelly, you can find a show on SiriusXM or go and find it on YouTube.